Welcome to TradeTheNBI.com. This is John. This report is for the 13th of August, and yesterday we saw a continuation of a little bit of burst as we made new highs, slightly off of them right now, but we've had this continued rise and shakeout. We started to make a slightly lower shakeout reading from within this, what we would call modestly overbought over the plus 15 on the shakeout. When you get plus 25, then you know you really reached that extreme. But magenta is over the plus 15 as well, so that's also critical from a extreme condition. And as long as it stays above that, usually what we get is any retrace usually is just a reset. But then we look at our power mo, and you can see that we've maintained above the 13 all the way through this. And this is where we look at that narrowing of the magenta and green here. And then when they begin the expansion phase, if we're still in an uptick with our Azure Power Mo, then usually you get your rise. Like when we saw here, we had the buy crossover on a big expansion that led to the last increase. But on the downside of it, we were moving lower, and then we had the expansion, and it reversed after we had the uptick and the decline, and that just led to that, which was kind of just flat for a while. But overall, you can see that every time we get that Power Mo 2 cross, works very effectively in identifying where we're at. From a DOC standpoint, we still have cyan under red. Green, we've cut into this, what I call a duck bill, where everything goes flatlined. And with the reset of the steel, any uptick. Now, the key is maintaining that above the negative 13.5. And as long as the steel stays above that, just one uptick is all it's going to be for it to create a new run to the upside. So, and we're obviously going to see that intraday first. From an NQ, slightly behind, it's not making new highs, but it was well ahead of the S&P, and this is some of the concern that some of the tech has moved a little bit further than some of the other remaining S&P 500 stocks, and so it's just kind of catching up. And again, I think a lot of this is still a rebalancing of devaluation of the dollar. We're starting to see some inflation, particularly in food prices, and that was a reflection of the supply disruptions that took place during the initial part of the lockdowns, and that where they had to get rid of a lot of food products and that simply because of the supply disruption. But overall, economy is still in an interesting state. You have the government pretty much propping up everything, and the Fed buying up the world, and that's certainly wanting to devalue the dollar from a euro standpoint. Even though the U.S. is still performing better than the euro, it's still giving a needed boost to the U.S. side of things. Oil still up at the peaks. I mean, this has just been a beautiful flat line, but again, that push towards 50 is probably built into the scenario of the devaluation of the dollar, particularly oil countries, and that the problem is that you don't have the demand, and as long as there's no demand for them to really force that revaluation, you're not going to see the boost. But as soon as demand actually increases enough, then fine, we would certainly get that balancing. Since oil is traded in dollars, it's definitely got to rise. And from a gold standpoint, we're just filling back in those positive extremes. We've filled that gap right here. Still have a couple more to fill back in within this broader context. It doesn't mean that people are shying away from gold. It's just that you've got enough movement in equities that asset class-wise doesn't hurt to be in them. Now, from a 5K standpoint, we were in this slight lull down, and we ended up with this Power Mo 2 cross along with the orange dip, and we broke above the negative 13.5. That was the initial carry for a positive move, and we got the green indications right there. When we did get weakness, though, you can see the Power Mo crossed. We had that increase in the spread between the green and magenta here. I mean, when it pops up, you get that indication of, a stronger move. That led to some new lows taking place within where we were, but then as soon as we upticked and then started the new expansion, that led to the broader move, and then we obviously were cyan under red, and then that led to the breakout. And I was talking about here when we were at the 33.59, just a matter of watching where we were going to be at that point, and we were just cyan under red through most of that, so it was really a non-event, and we pretty much stayed with Power Mode 2 even on a 5K above the 13 throughout most of it. And when it did dip, you didn't get any orange, magenta crossover for a sell within that. So by the time we did get it, which was over here, it was pretty short-lived because we turned around with a new buy config right at the end there, and that led to the move towards the highs. But as we got further across, we ended up with our DLC spread that took place right here with the magenta candle. Still fairly accurate on those. The key for looking at them is literally whether we have a steel reset or not. In this particular case, we did. It held it up a little bit for a while then, and then you ended up with that crossover break right here where the cyan breaks from the green, and then we ended up with red moving lower and below, and that's led to a little bit of the softness that we see here. We now have a new configuration right here where we're forming a tight constriction right here on the power mode between magenta and green, and if that breaks back up to the upside, that would be the next move up, unless we're in a power mode decline, which was what we would be looking for, and that would indicate a further break. But of course, that 33.59 is going to be the draw coming back into this. We did fill the dip below the red line, which was right here, and that was pretty clean. And we also, that was a response to all these positive extremes going right back up to here. And it's just filled all those positive extremes going back. No shock with any of that. I did make an adjustment with the Power 2 program that I was been working with. What I wanted to do, I isolate was the buy configurations when they first pop in to see how relevant they were at the bottoms, and so far it's been pretty decent capture. And this will just get added into our PNT2, because the key is to capture the bulk of these bottom moves that are about to spark a rally coming up, and then also to recognize the ones that are start off okay and quickly just soften. And we can see it within our DOC as well as shakeout breakdowns, and that won't be hard to add into the language for when to get out of those long signals that just don't have the strength. So, like, even from here, you get the nice buy, starts the uptick, but then immediately turns around on a strong dip with the sell, and then new buy configuration takes off, and then likewise. So that just becomes a management issue. There's still always going to be some of these, like where we don't have a steel reset taking place, and we're still within a pretty strong negative shakeout that I'm working with some of those details to avoid those constructs, but we certainly do capture the bottom setup of it, and that usually leads to pretty decent moves. And what I wanted to do is just pretty much turn everything red so I could see how often a new buy signal would be generated within it. So even at the peak moves, we can still see that when we get that turn up with the cross and the magenta, particularly in the oversold categories, that's the next configuration, is to examine the relationship between our both cyan greens as well as orange and steel relationships. Particularly, I'm always interested in the failures, as opposed to, we know that we're going to capture the bottoms of the right side moves. It's just a matter of making sure that we're able to identify when those are at higher risk, so that we can just put a tighter constraint on them and yet be smoother with ones that we have much cleaner reactions to from a signaling standpoint. So all in all, it's good stuff. It's just a matter of putting it all in a concise manner that we can trade effectively with. But as always, I will put up anything relevant on our Skype chat and detail it from there. Trade well. We'll talk to you later.